Okay, so you've heard from Coles about what does the consumer want. You've heard from JBS about how they're trying to get those signals from the consumers back to producers. So what I thought I might do is spend my session on how is science and technology helping to enable that. And Mark has touched on some of it already. So I'll break my presentation down into what can we do today, and then some of the stuff we're actually working on today but might not be ready for the next 5 or 10 years, and how they will either help people doing R&D around genetics and or actually help our whole supply chain be more efficient. And some of this stuff is out there. We don't know if we'll ever get it into a processing plant, but we're not going to die not knowing, that's for sure. So Mark mentioned DEXA. He had that slide of palpation, GR, knife, DEXA, CT. So my first few slides are on DEXA. You'll hear me mention the word CT a couple of times. And because we've probably got a lamb audience around here, let's just concentrate on that bottom row. So when you hear about DEXA grading systems, there's really 3 components to what makes that work. So you've got the first 2 columns being the technology. So what is that technology? And I'll explain that in a moment. You've then got an algorithm. So you can have a set of scales and you can put something on it, but there's an algorithm or a software that actually presents you with the weight of whatever you've just weighed. And then just like a set of scales, you need to calibrate that to something, so tear off those scales. So let's just look at the technology side first. And if you look at that lamb example on that bottom row, and that's an image out of the JBS Bordertown facility, but there's 3 of these in Australia already, and JBS is putting their second, but Australia's 4th system in as we speak. So that technology in Australia using DEXA X-ray systems has already processed more than 3 million carcasses in Australia. Okay, so this technology is in a plant, in plants in Australia and New Zealand, and from a technology perspective, scans animals every day. So if we go to that next column, what we've called the algorithm, that's where you take the output from that system and you try and then correlate it to some sort of gold standard, which I'll come back to in a moment. And in the lamb system, we had the Kirby nuclear flock. Now, I'm hoping the audience understands a lot more about what that means than what I've said. I just know that's the animals that we acquired. The Murdoch team grew those animals out across a couple of different life stages. And we took them through the Bordertown plant in batches of 100. We slaughtered them. We took them off the kill floor and ran them through the DEXA grading system on the boning room. So we manhandled all of them. We then put them back into the chiller. We put half in a spray chiller, half in a one that we turned off. We then brought them out at 12 hours, 24, 36, 48 and 72 hours, all 600 animals. And that took about 12 months. And what we were trying to understand was if you measured these animals at time of death, in essence, or at end of slaughter floor, so hot, where you measure them 12 hours after slaughter, or 24, or 36, or 48, or 72, trying to simulate weekends, short weekends, long weekends, does the technology give you a different result? What happens if you spray chill or you don't spray chill? Because not every plant does it. And the really pleasing answer for all of us is it makes no difference at all to the result. Isn't that absolutely fantastic? So no matter what JBS does or anyone else does to their processing plant in this area, they can't bugger up the results for us. Absolutely fantastic outcome. And that 4th column is the actual top one Mark mentions, actually the room that the JBS has let us have to put a CT scanner in for R&D purposes. And that bottom image is actually that CT scanner and us running some lambs through. So then what we do is we take those 600 lamb animals, and we run each of them through a CT scanner, because a CT scanner is what we call the gold standard for meat, fat, bone measurement. So sure, you can bone an animal out, but it will not be as accurate or repeatable, because we're using humans, than actually running a lamb carcass through a CT scanner. So you'll see us reference CT all the time as the gold standard, and that R squared value down there is how close we are to giving you effectively a CT lean meat yield value. And in lambs, we're greater than 0.9 already. So Mark mentioned 0.88. With the additional work we've done recently, it's already up to 0.9. And that's not changing the hardware, it's just putting more animals through, and the Murdoch team really grinding hard that algorithm. So that's doable today. So what's that going to give to you as producers, or as to seed stocks, or to researchers in the room? And I've got 3 slides now I'm going to step through, and unfortunately the numbers will get smaller as I add more columns to the PowerPoint presentation. And this is data I've generated in an Excel spreadsheet using a random number generator. So don't get fixated on weights and percentage breakdowns, it's just an example. So for 3/4 of that chart up there, in theory you're getting that back now. You're getting some slaughter details back potentially, you're getting a weight, and you're getting a dollars per kilogram price back. So the minute you turn one of these DEXA units on, you actually start to get the amount of meat, fat and bone across each of those carcasses. Right? So that's a start. If you then go and take the software, so if I just look at the right-hand side there, you can see the DEXA image on the right-hand side. This next slide has got an image of the carcass cutting system in there. You don't have to put a carcass cutting system in, but if you take the smarts that system uses, where it gets an X-ray image and works out how to cut that animal up into 4 portions. So if you just grab that software algorithm and add that onto the DEXA system, all of a sudden you're starting to get meat, fat and bone and weights across 4 portions of that lamb carcass. So that's doable today, and it's what we're starting to do with the JBS Bordertown team and soon their Brooklyn system. And then Mark also mentioned the carcass cuts calculator. So the next slide is if you then take the DEXA system, you then take the cutting software, so that algorithm that portions an animal up, you don't have to cut it, and then you feed that into the existing carcass cuts calculator, you're starting to get meat, fat and bone across the primals. So really, really interesting stuff. And one of the hard things, and Mark almost threw this out there, I think is a bit of a challenge, is we're going to give you lots of data. What are you going to do with it? Yeah, and I mean that as a challenge, and we're ready to go on that journey with you guys. So why will processors put this in? So for those of you that haven't had the luxury of going through the Bordertown facility, here's a system of that automated lamb cutting system at Bordertown. And as Mark mentioned, this first went in, not to give producers feedback, was actually to take these animals and cut them up very, very accurately. So if you've got a 4/4 piece of meat that's worth $5 a kilo, you've got your middle section worth $20 a kilo, and that hind quarter worth $10 a kilo, then getting those cut lines wrong 5 millimetres costs a lot of money to this industry. So using an X-ray image, adjusting those portion cutters to plus or minus a couple of millimetres of accuracy, cutting that 4/4 off at a 4-rib 4/4 every time, is worth a lot of money to a processing plant. Now don't get me wrong, JBS spent a lot of money to put this in. So it's not money for nothing, but the returns are there. We're obviously taking humans away from dangerous tasks, so we don't have humans using bandsaws now. Because of the special knives, the rotating knives that we use, there's less sawdust, so that's a yield pickup, but also a shelf life pickup as well. Now what's really interesting, just as this runs, and I don't think it was Mark that gave me the angry phone call at about 2 o'clock one morning when I was back in Sydney, but it was definitely one of his colleagues effectively telling me that this machine was cutting every animal wrong. One of the really interesting things, and if you think about it from a genetics perspective, is having now X-rayed probably more than 10 million animals across Australia and New Zealand, we know, rough rule of thumb, 89% of animals, lamb animals, have 13 ribs. The other 11% is roughly split between 12 and 14 rib animals. And I'm respectfully saying this about JBS because they were not to know. They had a customer that was asking for 9 rib racks. So JBS wanted us to produce from them a 4-rib 4/4, help me with the maths here, a 9-rib rack and a 1-rib loin. Does that work? 14, sorry, they were happy with a 0-rib loin, I apologise. So a 4-rib 4/4, 9-rib rack. And of course, when we were putting 12-rib animals through, we were giving them 4-rib 4/4s, but we're giving them 8-rib racks. And of course, by the time this product goes down the boning room, you can't match the 4/4 up with the middle. and it was the Scott machine. I've got my old Scott hat on, I apologise for that. It was our machine that was causing the problem. But start to think about that from a genetics perspective. Is it a good thing to actually start growing more 14-rib animals? If that gives us a 1-rib loin, a 9-rib rack and a 4-rib forequarter. I don't know the answer to that question. But just think about some of this really great data we're going to start getting as an industry. So you've heard both of the two previous presenters talk about, but let's not forget about eating quality. So what's science doing about eating quality? This is an NMR or an MRI system. It's actually a system that my old employer develops, and Mark saw this, it was yesterday we showed it to you, Mark, I think. It's a current MLA project. Now this thing has been developed really for use at a GP or at a high-end sports organisation like the Broncos. I'm just making that up, or an AFL team. So you've got a player come off the field, you don't know whether you should hit them with some bloody gas or an injection and get them back out there, whether you should rest them. So you put their arm through this and it gives you some soft tissue feedback. So we had a bit of an aha moment, generically the industry, JBS included, and said, well, I wonder how we could apply this to our industry. Early days, we're starting to pick up sarcomere length with this thing. Now, I don't think we'll ever get this big enough to put a whole carcass through. But imagine having something like MSA for lamb, and then on your sweet cuts, your tenderloins, or some of your rib cuts, you could put it through here and underpin a company brand or a Coles brand. Almost give that money back guarantee on eating quality. This is a beef example, but it's potentially fit for purpose when we're talking about marbling for lamb. This is us trying to understand how we can measure marbling with CT systems. And what we've been able to work out is a couple of things, and it's not rocket science, but it's great. And I'm going to use a beef example, but it's important for lamb as well. We can measure the amount of marbling in a 37-degree animal as accurately with a CT scanner as you can when you put that same marbling product through 5 or 6 days later at 2 degrees Celsius. So if you think about beef for a moment, you're running a plant that's processing 450-day grain-fed cattle. You chill that animal down for 2 reasons. One is for food safety, get that butt temperature down, and the other is you want that marbling to come out for your graders. So you'll chill it for a day to do the food safety, but then you'll chill it for another 2 days so your manual grading staff can see that marbling. We don't need to do that anymore if we get this technology to work. Imagine if we can do this on a live animal. Imagine if you could work out the marbling of an animal before you send it off to slaughter. What would that do for our industry? What would it do for genetics? But as Mark mentioned, we've got limitations with current medical X-ray or current medical CT systems. So here's some stuff in the aviation industry that we're just starting to do some work on. So this is not what you walk through when you're jumping on a plane. It's not that one now where you stand up and do that and everyone can see your private parts, and trust me, they can. I've seen the images. Yeah. This is what your bags go through, and this is CTing your bags at the rate the bags get checked in, at the size the bags are, which predominantly, I know when I travel with my partner, is a lot bigger than a lamb carcass. And that's just for an overnight trip. So look at the size of that orifice. So if I just go to the next slide, actually I'm going to give you one more video, and then we'll bring it home on where it's all going. So this is existing technology built in the UK, videos from the US, and this is using what they call cone beam flat panel CT. Starting to use this, nothing to do with the industry we obviously work in or why we're here today, starting to use this to scan thoroughbred racehorses and say, should you rest them? What medical activity should you undertake on them? So this is getting CTs of horses not being knocked out. I'm not clever enough to say the correct sophisticated word. I'll say euthanised if I try to say the right word, and that's not correct. So what does all that mean for our industry? So on the left-hand side, we know medical CT in their current form are not big enough definitely to do beef. You might get the odd lamb through, but also they're designed for humans. So you scan a human patient once every 15, 20 minutes, every hour, and during that off time, they're cooling down. We know if we run these medical CT systems, we'll put about 10 lambs through it in a couple of minutes, and then they need to sit down for an hour and cool down. So they're a great R&D tool, not an inline use tool. And we know flat panel. We know we can potentially do that a little bit faster, but we won't have the cool down issues, but it's a lot slower. So you saw that animal, that horse one, move around. But there's a use for it, and I'll come back to that in a moment. And then the aviation security stuff, real time, rapid. But what we're trying to understand is, have we lost some accuracy going from a medical CT to an aviation CT system? And the companies whose equipment we're working on, based in the UK and the US, are actually trying to get their head around at the moment, could you ever build one of these CT systems and drive a 40-foot container through it? Which is really interesting for me. So imagine if those guys could achieve that. You could have a livestock truck drive through a big CT system and know everything about that animal that's on that livestock truck. Imagine how that would change this industry. On the right-hand side, and this is just a bit of technical information, you'll hear the terms SEXA, DEXA, MEXA, single energy, dual energy, multi-energy. When we first did Mark's cutting room in Bordertown, that was single energy. All we cared about was where the bones were, because we just wanted to cut between bones. We upgraded that, I think, about 3 years ago to multi-energy, because we wanted to know where the bones were, and one of the other two components being meat or fat, to try and give some of this lean meat yield feedback. And we're now starting to look at multi-energy. So can we pick up other things in the animal? The really great thing, and we've proven this at Bordertown, and it might be a bit hard to see, you can see it, but effectively on that top one there on the right-hand side, you've got a black line going down, dotted line, dashed line. On the second one, you've got a red line, and on the last one, I think that's a green line if my eyes aren't lying to me. So when you go from single energy to dual energy to multi-energy, you pull out a detector panel and you put the next one in. So the good stuff about this technology is an industry, we can invest in it and upgrade it, fit for purpose as time goes on. So how's this going to look in the industry over the next few years to the best of our knowledge? Let's look at the live side. So there is the potential, and we're starting to undertake some work to actually have a go at scanning live animals whilst they're moving. We don't know if that's going to be successful. We don't know if we're going to get good images. We don't know what those images are going to tell us, but we're working on it. Middle panel, imagine those guys getting us a container-sized CT system we could run livestock trucks through. What an absolutely brilliant thing that would be for the genetics industry and for our whole supply chain to understand how to process an animal. So imagine Mark, if he went to a sale yard, ran a full truck through one of these things, he actually work out whether that truck should go to Cobram, Longford or Brooklyn, depending on what those animals were best cut up for. And then what can we do at feedlots? So we're starting to play in that space as well. On processing side, in that middle is the journey we're on at the moment with respect to getting this stuff out in the real world, so getting these DEXA systems out in beef and lamb, either on the hot or the cold side of the chillers. I showed you that little MRI system. Maybe we might have that at the end of plant, giving real objective feedback on eating quality on every primal or every major primal that goes through. And then on the left-hand side, if ever we get this aviation CT stuff to work, and even if we don't get it at full truck size, but we can get it at livestock size, we imagine probably putting that just after the knocking box. So you pick up health feedback, eviscera feedback, seeds, onchocerca, and a range of other things. And potentially that feedback is coming. So I've just got 2 more slides. How do we actually make sure that as we roll this technology out, whatever JBS has got, whatever Thomas Foods has got, I know it's probably a sheep industry, a sheep audience, whatever Tees has got, it doesn't matter where you were to send Sean Starling to get your feedback, you're going to get the same feedback. You know, when you go to a supermarket and weigh and over the checkout scales, you trust weights and measures has been in it with Coles and Audi and know that that scale, when it says 5 kilograms, is 5 kilograms. So how do we do something similar in this industry? Well, the first thing is to make sure the technology inside is the same. So if we use the computer analogy, when computers in their early days used to come out and Intel was bashing against AMD or whatever their competition was, you didn't care necessarily what the computer looked like on the outside, you looked for that Intel inside sticker. So definitely what we're promoting is that DEXA inside. So no matter whether you go to JBS, Thomas Foods, ALC, Gundagai, you know your animal's going to get scanned on the same inside technology. That middle section is you need then an algorithm to convert that to meat-fat bone feedback. That's the algorithm that Graham Gardner and his Murdoch team has been generating, and that's owned by the industry, that IP. So if MLA has an involvement in getting these systems out, we will make sure every system that goes out has got that industry algorithm in. So no matter who you send it to, same technology, same conversion algorithm. And then calibration blocks. So just like you put a known weight on a set of scales, every one of these X-ray rooms will have a calibration block in it. So unlike a set of scales where at the start of the morning you tear it and then you don't for 3 or 4 hours, every time we take an X-ray image, it'll take an image of that calibration block, and so every image will be calibrated. So you won't need to worry about where you were on the day of processing with respect to calibration, because we calibrate on every snapshot. And then finally, a mobile CT scanner to run around and just make sure all of these processing plants are calibrated correctly and really calibrate the calibrating blocks. So that's the journey that we're on giving you guys, whether you be producers, genetic suppliers or researchers, some more data. Challenge is how you're going to use it. I think the challenge for Mark and myself is how we're going to present it to you as well and help you use that. So now I just want to finish off with one other slide about what other things are we doing on farm that might assist in the genetic space as well. Oops, that's not the one we want. This is early days. We haven't made an investment in this space yet. This is about a third of the size of a Toyota Land Cruiser. US military, so it's military spec, spends a lot of its time in war zones. No driver. So they can get about 7 days. If you take that trailer off and put a diesel tank on the back, you get about 7 days worth of running time out of it. And she'll do a couple 100 kilometres a day. That's just a guy with a dead man switch to make sure it doesn't mow a tree down, I think. So what we're starting to talk to this organisation about, and it's the very first project we're going to do with them, is how do we take this technology and make it applicable for livestock? So it's bulletproof. Literally, it's bulletproof. Yeah? The thing will go over any terrain that you want. It's not going to knock over and run over a tree, but it's not going to worry about swamps too much. It's not going to worry about the terrain too much. So the first project we're going to do with these guys is they're actually going to put a silent drive on it. So they're going to put an electrical drive on it. And a concept is you could send it out on a mission. When it spots livestock, it can move into quiet drive. It can actually let you know back home that I've got near some livestock, so you could tele-remote control it, or it could just do something automatically. So it could have a drone tethered to it. So if you start to think either as yourself as a producer, or you're starting to change genetics to think about animal performance, how does this non-human interaction monitoring system start to come into account? And the value add option I love on this one is this guy. You'd have to buy this option if we get it to work. Taking rabbits out from 300 metres away. So I guess that's the end for me. I just want to give you a bit of an idea of how we're supporting Mark and the JBSs of the world and Coles with technology that's going in today as we speak. What might the next 5 or 10 years look like in this space? We're working on it now, but what might it look like in 5 or 10 years? So if either you're a producer thinking about what you might want to do with your flock or your herd, if you're a genetic supplier, what sort of information are you thinking you might want back? But also, what might our consumers actually have within their buying knowledge to actually start? You know, if we could measure sarcomere length, and on every packet, you know, you could pick up 2 ends of a strip loin as a steak, and maybe we could say cook the right end for 2 minutes and cook the left end for 1.8 minutes. We don't know. Is that possible? We're just not sure. But think about that's what consumers could be doing in 5 or 10 years' time, and how we're going to get ready for it, especially if other proteins are potentially going to offer it. And then I think we all should have a tank as a toy. That's my final closing statement.
Just quickly, what do you think are some of the main challenges in the main technologies that you were talking about and getting them adopted to get feedback?
Absolute fear. Absolute fear. Balance with, so I guess I sit in a really good position. I sit between people that want to adopt and use this stuff or people that don't want to adopt and use it and the researchers. So on this side, you've got fear and a bit of excitement. And on this side, we've got researchers maybe trying to develop stuff we'll never need. So it's a really interesting balance to get right. And I'm saying that respectful of both camps. The other thing is, it is a lot of money to do the research in this area before it becomes commercial, and it takes time. That stuff that Scott Technology's done around the X-ray grading that's now DEXA, they've spent millions on it and years on it, and now we're just trying to think about 15 years down the track, how do we use it for lean meat yield? So it doesn't happen overnight. And I think, and no doubt some of you have seen the media, and it hasn't got too personal yet, but hey, watch this space, it might, who knows, is how do you get a whole industry collective to take a step up at once, especially in this space of DEXA. I think one of the worst outcomes for this industry would be we have some process using DEXA feedback with an R squared of 0.9, some processes using palpation at whatever it was, 0.08, and others using 3 or 4 other technologies. Imagine trying to work out, no matter where you sent your livestock to, and you got feedback, well, now I've got to put some sort of fudge factor over it, depending on what that technology measurement was. Put it a different way, imagine jumping in a car, especially here in this state where speed cameras have next to no tolerance, and going, crap, I'm in a Ford. If it says 100 kilometres, that actually means 105, so I better drive at 98. But then if you jump in your wife's Toyota, actually when it says it's 98, it's doing 94, so you better drive a bit faster. And if we don't get this measurement stuff bulletproof and consistent across the industry, it's going to be like driving down in Victoria and not knowing whether you're going to have a speed ticket come up in your mail in the future or not. We've got to get consistency around measurement systems. We've got to get them all calibrated back to this CT system. We need an AusMeet type organisation to be our industry internal but independent calibrators and auditors. I don't want an external body to be auditing or validating what we do in this industry, but we need some independence as well. So in my mind, AusMeet's the perfect fit for that role.
Look, I'm really excited about the potential that we're going to have for this sort of measurement coming out. But as a seed stock breeder, I think it's going to end up more like the tail wagging the dog, because I see it as our job to try and stay 2 or 3 years in front of what the commercial person wants. At the moment, all this is coming from the abattoirs back, and so it's probably more a statement for the sheep genetics team and all that we need to be able to get to have access to this information for the live animals, not just the dead ones that go through.
And am I allowed to, was that a question? Am I allowed to respond? Sorry, I'm just being naive, because I'm more than happy to respond. So on one of those slides there, I had a mobile CT scanner. So we're trying to get approved at the moment. Now, it's just going to be a medical system. Eventually, we might get a mobile aviation CT scanner, but we would actually see that could be used by producers and seed stock suppliers to actually get feedback within your business before you send any of your products anywhere. So that's one of the things we're looking at. I was going to say something else. What was it? And definitely that's what we're also trying to drive to understand whether we can use some of this know-how on the live side. So we will, once we get a few of the energy levels and that that I'm happy with, that we're not going to do any detrimental damage from an R&D perspective to live animals. Once I'm comfortable we've got that right, we've got our ethics right, we will start scanning some live animals and see what we can see with this stuff. And once again, I wouldn't for once necessarily think every producer in Australia, and I'm going to throw a number out just to scare people to make a point, would invest in $1 million X-ray system. I mean, I think that's not going to happen in my life, but I'm definitely not suggesting that either. But there might be a business model where someone has purchased that $1 million bit of kit and offers it for the 2 days of the year you want it, or for the week that you're doing some mustering or something like that. So we're definitely trying to do a couple of things. Have some R&D tools that anyone in industry can call on and use for understanding their business a little bit more. And the second thing is, how do we produce some of these widgets in a mobile way that might actually spur on some other businesses to actually offer that service for the 1 or 2 days or that 1 week that you need it in your production farm business or your genetics business.
Sean, can I ask, with all this technology, I haven't really heard it work. So when meat gets to the supermarket, it can be graded either 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 according to the most tender meat. How far are we away from that? Is there some technology where you're going to be able to do that? Because the consumer wants to know they're having really nice tender meat, and if there's a guarantee that number 5 is going to be the most tender meat, surely that's something which we really need to aim at.
Yeah. So hopefully this doesn't sound like a political answer, and I apologise if it does. It's not meant to be. I'll answer that in 2 ways, and I can't remember the numbers. I should know the numbers. I don't. But no matter as an industry how good and how good our feed forward information is to consumers on tenderness, 50% of the eating, and I'm making that number up. It's ballpark. 50% of that eating experience is how they don't cook it well. Now, that's not me dodging the question, but what I wanted to do is use that as a bit of a discussion point. So even if we have the best feed-forward, objective tenderness systems, and we're working on it, don't get me wrong, we've still got to have that consumer factor into it. So yes, we're going to, we've already got MSA. We've got MSA for beef. They're working on MSA for lamb. That's already like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-star type system. But MSA is to let others like JBS underpin their star brand system if that's the way they go. And we'll keep working on those objective measures as you saw. They're probably 5 or 10 years away. So the JBSs of the world, if they want to almost give a money-back guarantee on a tenderloin, lamb tenderloin, they can, if that's the way the technology works. I think the other thing now, taking it maybe another 5 years past that, and I spend quite a lot of time looking at what the white goods appliance industry does, so smart kitchens. It may not be very far away, and I've seen examples of this, but Red Meat doesn't offer a service in this space, where we're so good at measuring unique primals or unique steaks that we put that information on the packaging, and that talks to an oven to take that other 50% out that the consumer stuffs up. So a perfect world for me, and I was at a trade show in Chicago this side of Christmas where I saw, I think it was either Electrolux or the Westinghouse Smart Kitchen that actually does this. So they were pulling packets out of a refrigerator. It was not red meat. As an industry, we're not there, and it scares me. And that's what gets me up in the mornings, to make sure we are there. Taking packets of, and I'll make it up, Maggi noodles. I don't know what it was. And they would take that, they'd put it into the microwave, add some water, and the microwave just knew what that product was, weighed how much water you'd put in, and cooked it for the perfect amount of time. That's where I think we need to get to as an industry. So we've definitely got to get better objective measurements around eating quality, how we will use them. Sure, I think that will be producer feedback, but I think initially we'll do it at a sweet cut primal level, so those major cuts where we demand some of that fast cooking eating quality rather than the slow cook cuts, and ideally it starts to feed into those smart kitchens of the future.
I don't want to be negative, but it doesn't matter how you mark a piece of meat. I can get the piece of meat that's the most tender, and I can ruin it for you very easily. And I think the big thing is, let's not take the fun out of cooking. Sorry I burnt it last night, but next time I'll try harder and I'll learn about it. Yep. And the other thing is, when you do get to this stage where you can put your animals through, see if you can make sure we can claim it on our Medibank or our... All right.
I'm just going to write that down. You've just given me a business model idea. Might be a bit of insider trading, so maybe I shouldn't actually patent what I've just heard. So, look, just on your first comment, and I apologise if that's not the way. There was 2 parts to your first comment, as in consumers can stuff it. That's the message I was trying to make. So even if we've got a perfect system, consumers can still stuff it. And I'm definitely not trying to take the joy out of cooking. But if you've got people of the future who actually might not see any joy in cooking, I don't. When I get home from work at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, the last thing I want to do is actually eat, to be honest. If I could have it on a tablet, I would. Yeah. Now, not everybody is like that, luckily, or we wouldn't have an industry, right? Give me a meat tablet, I'd be happy with that. I eat a lot of jerky, yeah, because I don't have to cook it, and I know what's coming into me is good protein. So I eat a lot of jerky. Great meal for me. And with chocolate, that's dessert and wine, and I'm done. That's it for the night for me. Can be breakfast too on a Sunday morning. what we've got to be careful of is I would never stand up here and make a sweeping statement of this is what all consumers are going to want to do in the future. But I tell you what, those consumers that are going to have those smart kitchens, they're going to be in those 400 affluent stores. Yeah? They're not going to be every consumer, but if you can make $100 a kilo out of those 400 stores rather than $30 a kilo, why wouldn't we want to do it? Why wouldn't we want to do it?